Hello everyone, welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here a little bit later today because I was busy. It's the weekend, not used to doing these articles on the weekend. I think it's cool, but trying to keep up with all the content, I'll be honest, is on some days harder than you might think. I think the vast majority of the people that are content creators on YouTube are not career content creators, at least the ones in our field. Let's say Warhammer is a field. And it's just a labor of love. So trying to squeeze that in amongst other things you got going on and work and whatnot can be difficult sometimes. So bear with us if it's a little delayed. I can tell you right now already that tomorrow's article, which will be about Tzeentch, one of my armies, if we scroll down here, this is pretty obviously Tzeentch. It says it's different kind of fire, sort of blue, or maybe pink, and sometimes green. Yeah, that's pretty much on the nose. But anyway, that'll be delayed because I've got a kill team day tomorrow with Nick and our buddies Luke and Martin. Just kind of casually playing kill team. It'll literally be my third game ever. But anyway, guys, today is Fyreslayers. Tomorrow is Tzeentch. And then we'll see what happens. Excited to finally hit some of Jonas, his army. So that'll be fun. And get to the stuff that probably a lot of people actually follow us for. We also haven't had Slaves yet. Slaves was one of our bigger armies at one point. And that'll be fun to do as well. So anyway, guys, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you guys are all pumped up for all these Scourge of Ghyran updates. I have to say, thus far, I think they started off with a bang with Skaven. I've said this a few times, and some of them have been more let downy than others. I think what we're going to see today, I've already taken a look at it, might fall more in that category than the Skaven category. But let me know what some of your favorites are thus far, and we'll do a roundup, a tier list at the end. Anyway, okay, here we go. So lore video, and then we come down here. No new information about the GHB, but that's totally fine. We only get one war scroll this time. I think the only other army that's had one war scroll was Stormcast thus far. And that's going to be the Auric Rune Sun on Magmadroth. If you're not aware, there's only one monster in Fyreslayers as it currently exists, or one thing that isn't just a little guy walking around on feet. And anyway, all three of them are on Magmadroths, and you also can do these same heroes, the Rune Sun, the Rune Smiter, and the Rune Father on foot. It's a very uniform, monolithic army, but this is the kind that traditionally has been the kind that could become battle line in 3rd edition terms, we should say. And now with the way that they've changed how some armies' monsters can be folded into the regiments of other heroes so that you can have less drops and still do kind of a monster mash thing, that's possible with these guys. As you see here at the bottom, this hero can join an eligible regiment as Volktrix's Chosen, which means he can go in the regiment of, say, like Rune Father. Anyway, so I don't know that anything really important here has changed. It was 260 points, and now he's gone up 50. Remember, going up is not exactly fair. It's going up from what he currently is, but when the battle scroll comes out, we're going to get new points for everything anyway. Maybe some things will move to the point where this actually is a discount. So I wouldn't start saying just yet that this is supposed to be way more valuable. That said, a lot of times the units that they're changing in these Scourge of Ghyran updates are units that don't see a whole lot of play and need a boost, and that's kind of how we've seen most of them, is at least a small boost or a change in functionality and where their role fits in a given army. And as such, you would kind of hope that that unit, the base version of it, the one from the index or the battle tome as it always exists, not just the temporary season version, wouldn't go up in points. But we'll have to see. Who knows what's going to happen. Anyway, so the Rune Sun on Magmadroth went up by 50 points and can still take 0-1 Grimmir's Chosen. And then any Fyreslayers stays the same, is on the same type of base, and can still be taken as Volktrix's Chosen. So let's take a look at the War Scroll. Rune Sun on Magmadroth. Let's take a look at the wheel first. We've got a 10-inch move still, 14 health, 5 control, 4 up save. And like, as far as I'm aware, most Fyreslayers, he does in fact still have a 6+ ward. That's just moved to the top of the War Scroll here, like in the Soulblight book and the War Scroll cards, if you ever bought those. His keywords are hero, monster, 6+ ward, order, Fyreslayers, Dwarden, and Magmadroth, none of which has changed. All right, so I think the big thing that's going to have to change here is either, I've already looked at this, by the way, but a functionality change here in the abilities or significant power output boost, because not only is he going up in points, evidently, but in my personal opinion, running all Magmadroths has never really been all that strong, at least not in the current edition of the game. So I'd like to see some important things get boosted so that it feels a little bit more worth it. So a Magmadroth, all of them, as far as I'm aware, have the exact same profile except for the guy on top of it in terms of weapons. So the ranged weapon is traditionally been a 10-inch range, 4 attacks, 3/3s -1 D3 with anti-infantry +1 rend, and that's a companion attack. That seems to have not changed at all. And usually when they do change them, they change the name as well, and the name stayed the same, so that's a little hint. Okay, let's look at the Magmadroth profiles. The last two under melee, those will be the companions. So you've got his claws and horns. That's been 6 attacks, 4s, 2s, -1, 2. That stayed the same, nothing changed. And then the blazing maw is 2 attacks, 4s, 2s, -2, 3. Also, nothing has changed, and it still brackets when it hits 10 or more damage down to 4 attacks. Again, nothing has changed with that. Let's look at the rider. Traditionally has been 5 attacks, 3s, -1, 2, anti-monster +1 rend, and that is exactly the same. So already I can tell you I'm not all that enthusiastic about this War Scroll change because I don't think he's doing enough output. It'd be really cool if you could run these as kind of like your main troops with a couple heroes on Magmadroth, and these will be the main ones that you're seeing. So like for every hero, maybe 2 Rune Fathers and a Rune Smiter plus 3 of these dudes. That could be kind of fun. I think that might fit in a list, or maybe that's a little too expensive. But in any case, it doesn't look like they're doing all that much more heavy lifting. But let's take a look at the abilities by first looking at what he's always had. So in addition to the battle damaged ability, which in my eyes isn't really an ability, he had a rampage that was a once per turn army, end of any turn, dominating roar. Again, this is in the regular version of the War Scroll. Pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be a target. So he wants to go monster hunting, and we saw that with his anti-monster rend on the Rune Sun's attacks himself. So this continues that kind of tradition. If this unit has fewer damage points than the target monster, subtract 10 from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. That's such a weird ability. So you pick an enemy monster in combat, and if this unit has fewer damage points than the target, so as in the Magmadroth himself has taken fewer damage points, so he's less wounded, subtract 10 from the target's control score. But the thing is, a lot of monsters can only have a control score of 5 unless they're the biggest ones, and even then usually only have 10 unless it's a Gargant. And so subtracting 10 would, even on something that has 10, only puts it down to 1 because a control score, as per the core rules, can never go lower than 1. So, such a weird ability, but I mean, it could swing an objective. I mean, it's basically forcing all but Gargants and Kragnos to go down to 1 control score for a monster, which means he'll take it over. But then it's so conditional. You have to be in combat with it still, which means you didn't do a power through, and you have to have taken less damage. But keep in mind, this guy has a 6-up ward, which is okay, but only a 4-up save and 14 health. So just such a weird rampage. He also had 2 passive abilities, Volcanic Blood. I think that stayed the same, so we can look at them together. Here's the original version's text. If you make an unmodified save roll of 1 for a combat attack that targets this unit, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. Yep, that's exactly the same. So what is that? That's just if you make a save roll of 1 for a combat attack that targets this unit, right? So what does that mean? Let's say that they've got enough rend that you think, oh, there's no point in rolling my saves. Roll them, right? Because you are allowed to roll them. It's just you're going to fail all of them. But if for every 1 you get, you do 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved, which is worth doing. So this is one of those rare units where it actually really does matter that you roll those saves no matter what. Okay, so that hasn't changed. So again, we have seen nothing that has changed his profile other than his points went up. But we'll get there. And he also had a Vying for Glory passive ability, which is not on the new War Scroll. This says, each time this unit destroys a monster, again, anti-monster, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of this unit's ancestral weapons, so those will be the weapons by the rider, for the rest of the battle. This can be affected, this unit can be affected by this ability multiple times, and effects are cumulative. So The reality is, how many monsters are you realistically going to kill with this thing? I mean, before he dies. So I get why this is kind of a non-bow ability. I mean, he's a little bit better at killing monsters, but it'd be nice if the shooting weapon was at least monster-focused, or that the Rune Sun's version changed the way the Magmadroth was trained, let's say. It was trained to go hunt monsters, but no. And that was the end of that War Scroll. I can see why people would think that War Scroll is not all that great. So let's see what those rules got replaced with. Like I said, Volcanic Blood stayed the same. So we get a once per battle deployment phase ability, Fire, Blood, and Vengeance. Pick a friendly Auric Rune Father on Magmadroth on the battlefield to be the target. And most likely that's the type of unit that would have chosen to bring this guy with him, if you're putting him in the same regiment as another hero. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons, including companion weapons, while the target is in combat, damaged, or destroyed. So it's checking for whether your chosen Auric Rune Father on Magmadroth, and it's once per battle deployment phase, so you can't do this with multiple Rune Suns. You're doing it with one, and you're only using this ability. And so that one time, right? So basically it's checking for whether that Rune Father is either damaged, which is decent, because there's a good chance he's going to get damaged. If he's destroyed, you still get to use the ability, or if he's in combat. So the easiest one to be triggered is just damaged, right? It could be like he took a mortal damage from even trying to activate a place of power or something. So you put 1 damage on that, and then this guy, all of his profiles, including, just his melee profiles, including the companion weapons, go up by 1 damage. So that's actually a meaningful change. But it does mean you have to have had a Rune Father or Magmadroth in the list. The good news is, the only way he's not getting this is if he's totally healed, right? And he's outside of combat. But anyway, so this puts this up to 3 damage, which of course is a 50% improvement on that, also here, and a 33% improvement here. So definitely not bad, but keep in mind his rend is pretty low unless he's going into a monster. So it's fine, and then these attack profiles are kind of meh. But I'd say it's already better than what the War Scroll was doing before, because that's subtracting from control score, and then you have to kill monsters to add 1 to this profile is kind of meh. Weak sauce, I guess. And then we have a rampage that replaces the end of turn rampage. Once per turn army, as with all rampages, any combat phase, so including that of your opponent, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be target. So within 3 inches and any unit. So this is the most generous version of this, other than getting to pick multiple enemy units. Roll a dice. If you roll a 3+, then you get to do an anti-horde ability. Roll a dice for each model in the target unit. For every 5+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. It's certainly not bad. I wish you just got to roll the 5 up for every model in the unit, or that this was on a 2 up at least, but a 3 up is a little brutal. So it's getting filtered down a bit. So let's say you had a unit that had, I don't know, what's a good number here? 30 models in it, all right? So a nice round number. So first off, the chance that the amount of wounds that you would do anyway on 5 up, say you did get to roll for those, would be 2/3 of that, or 1/3 of that. So you're doing 10 mortal wounds on average, but then to figure out the average, how often that actually ends up going off in general, is 2/3 of that. So we're talking about 6 2/3 wounds on average against a unit that's 30 dudes in it. And this is averaged out over many attempts against the unit of that size. So anyway, it's okay. I don't know if I'm all that excited about it. This ability is definitely the main reason you're taking the dude. Unfortunately, it's only this guy that gets to do it, which is kind of a bummer, because the Whoops All Magmadroths list kind of wants to take multiples of this unit in particular. And the fact that this rampage can only happen once and this can only happen once kind of takes a little bit of the kind of unsweetens the deal a bit for the second one you bring, right? So anyway, it's fine. Yeah, what do you guys think? It's a bummer that there's only 1 unit that got an improvement, but what I'm really waiting for this army is an expansion with mini droths and some dudes maybe wearing, I don't know, some kind of armor, or maybe some like golems, some stone golems or fire golems or something to kind of just mix up the vibe of the army and make them feel like they've got some more tactical options. This is just putting a band-aid on it a bit, but it's fun enough, but I don't know if it's strong enough to really get excited about. That said, let's scroll up here. So this is another one of the factions that is not getting is not getting a new battle formation, which I think is fine. It's whatever. But they are getting mount traits. Interestingly, the mount traits, which are called monstrous traits nowadays, are not actually called monstrous traits. They're called marks of Volcatrix, which is interesting. Why would you choose a different name for them? I get that they can only go on Magmadroths if you're not going to add other monsters to the army as well, which makes me think maybe somewhere in the course of this following year, they're going to get other monsters that aren't Magmadroths. That would be great. I'd love to see it, but we'll have to wait and see. So for the moment, they're one and the same. It might as well say monstrous traits, but you know, it's just a more flavorful name. So you can pick, and because none of them are unique units, you can pick any one of these you want for any one of those guys. And evidently we can buy extra enhancements now, so maybe you could even get 3 with this. So anyway, we got a shooting phase, a passive, and a reaction to using a rampage ability. Okay, but let's talk about the shooting phase one first. So once per battle, your shooting phase, incandescent blaze. For the rest of the turn, double the attacks characteristic of this unit's roaring fire stream. This unit's roaring fire stream has a damage characteristic of 3, so it's getting both of these. It's once per battle, it goes off automatically. It's in the shooting phase because of course it is, because we're going to come down here and look at that roaring fire stream, and it's doubling the attacks, so that's 8 damage, and then it's setting this to a flat 3, which means it has no variance. Obviously, it's possible to get a 3 out of this, but now it's going straight to 3. So that roaring fire stream goes up to 8 times 3, so 24, and then filtered by 16 over 36, or 4 over 9. Let's do that math real quick, just for fun. So 8 times 3, 24 times 16 divided by 36 gives us, on average, before you account for rend, 10 and 2/3 wounds. And of course, it's 1 rend or rend 2 against infantry. So, I mean, that's pretty fun. Unfortunately, it doesn't have shooting combat, which to me doesn't make any sense. Basically, in my opinion, any flame type ability, especially for an army that's got such a short range, isn't really a shooting army, and wants to get stuck in combat, should have shooting combat. I don't really get it, but it is what it is. I think that's fun, but I don't know if it's going to be all that impactful. But it's kind of fun. I think this one's probably better. Thickened scales, subtract 1 from the rend characteristic of weapons used for attacks that target this unit. Whenever they don't specify melee or weapons, this means including shooting. Sometimes it'll specify just shooting, but mostly when you see something like this, the default setting is if it's only going to do one or the other, it's going to be melee. And since it doesn't say anything about one or the other, it's for both, which is fantastic. Keeps the guy alive longer, especially considering he's got a 4-up base save. This is fantastic. So you're ignoring a point of rend. I think I would take this every time instead of this one. But now we've got reaction. You declared a rampage for this unit, Peerless Lineage. You can pick another eligible unit to be a second target of that rampage ability. If the ability requires a roll, you must roll for each target. Okay, so this means we need to go back and look at what all the rampages are for Magmadroths. Let's look at the one we just looked at. So we can pick another eligible unit to be the second target. The thing is, this was an anti-horde one, right? And so how many units is he going to be standing in combat with that are horde units to get the most out of this ability? So I don't think on this guy it's going to be all that strong, but let's take a look at some of the others. So what did I say? The one on the normal Rune Sun on Magmadroth was the rampage was a once per turn army, end of any turn. You pick an enemy monster and then you reduce its control score if you have fewer damage points. So you could do that with 2, which probably means you're stealing that objective, but how often are you going to be standing in combat with 2 monsters? I'm going to go look at the other 2 Magmadroths. The Rune Smiter on Magmadroth had a rampage that was once per turn army, any combat phase, lashing tail. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll 2d6. If the roll is equal to or less than the number of models in the target unit, inflict d3 plus 3 mortal damage. It's an anti-horde thing again. So, I mean, obviously if you're rolling 2d6, it goes off automatically if they have 12 or more models, because it'd have to match it or be less than. But how many times are you going to be standing in combat with 2 units, same idea, that have a high enough number of models that it's going to go off? I mean, it's fine. And then the Auric Runefather on Magmadroth, his rampage was once per turn army, any combat phase, Raging Inferno. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be target. Roll a dice on 3 plus subtract 1 from save rolls for the target. This is probably the best one, because I could see a world where you go into combat with the Runefather on Magmadroth, and you do happen to stand in combat with 2 of them, maybe you've got 2 Magmadroths and one wants to fight one unit, one wants to fight the other. On a 3-up, subtracting 1 from save rolls for 2 different units is pretty great. Or if you fail the first one, there's a good chance you'll get the second one off at least, and then you're getting some kind of advantage there. And then because all these rampages and other combat phase abilities happen before you start fighting, it could influence how you end up fighting for the rest of that turn. So that's kind of fun. So I don't know. Out of all these abilities here, I think I'd probably go with Thicken Scales the most. This one's okay. This one's kind of flavorful, but honestly, I don't think any of them are doing nearly as much as Thicken Scales is. So Fyreslayers players, especially Magmadroth players, let me know what you guys think. Okay, so our last thing here is going to be a new prayer lore, which, along with Khorne, I kind of expected this, by the way. It just makes sense. Along with Khorne, which is also a no wizards but all priests kind of army, it just made sense that they'd get an extra prayer lore here for Fyreslayers. So like we've done before, let's take a look at their existing prayer lore, and then we'll take a look at what they're getting instead. Okay, in the existing prayer lore, as in the one from the index, we've got Zargrim Blessings. It goes off on a 4, and it has the special effect that goes off on 8. Pick a friendly Fyreslayer's priest. Pick a visible friendly Fyreslayer's unit holier than 12. If it goes off, subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target that friendly unit until the start of your next turn. So it's got the long term there effect. And it's attacks in general, so it's including shooting attacks. That's very nice. And if the chanting roll was 8+, also subtract 1 from the Ren characteristic of attacks the target. That's really good. That's your unlimited prayer, by the way. Let's go ahead and look at the unlimited one here to do a direct comparison, because the unlimited prayer is such an important thing. And if you've got multiple priests in this army, it's a very important thing to focus on. It's not a one-for-one comparison to compare any of the other ones to an unlimited prayer, in my opinion. So the new unlimited prayer is Ichor of the Salamander. It goes off on a 3 and has a special crit, if you want to call it that, on 6, which might be one of the lowest I've ever seen for getting the special effect off. But pick a friendly Fyreslayer's priest, chant this prayer, pick a visible friendly Fyreslayer's monster, wholly within 12, so Magmadroth oriented. Until the start of your next turn, if any damage points were inflicted on an enemy unit by the target's volcanic blood ability, so the one that when you roll 1s does mortal damage back, after the damage sequence has been resolved, inflict 3 mortal damage on that enemy unit in addition to whatever you got off. But you had to have done any damage points, meaning at least 1 or more. And if the chanting roll was a 6+, inflict D3 plus 3 mortal damage instead. So let's see. Say you had to make 10 save rolls, or let's say you make 12 save rolls. On average, you're making them do 2 mortal damage. Let's assume they don't have a ward. So that means this thing's going off. And then you're doing 2 plus another 3, so maybe 5, or 2 plus D3 plus 3, so that's another 5 there, so that's 7. So anyway, and you can put that on all of your Magmadroths. The problem is, like I said before, the new Sun's ability doesn't really make sense to bring multiple Suns unless one dies, and then you can use the other one. But it's worth pointing out, if I go back down to the War Scroll, that because this ability triggers in the deployment phase and you can only use it once per battle. You know what? Now I'm changing my mind on this. It's once per battle per dude. I'm wrong about that. Usually once per battle has army next to it, but now that I think about it, we don't see that wording very much, so I'm changing my mind. If you already mentioned something, my bad for missing it. But no, this is in fact once per battle per Rune Sun, so he can pick a friendly Auric Rune Father. The question is, can that Rune Father be picked multiple times? That I don't know off the top of my head. I know that once a unit starts getting affected by an ability, that it counts as a passive and they can't have it stacked on them multiple times. I don't know if this is that type of ability though. So, okay, I definitely think that if you had a set of 3 Rune Fathers and 3 Rune Sons, that each Rune Son could pick a different father, that would definitely work. So that does make me think this is still a little better, but to be fair, the Rampage here is only once per dude. So the Rampage is falling off with any repetition you have, because that is in fact once per turn army. My apologies for missing that one, but we just don't see these a whole lot anymore. Once per battle, but it's not once per battle army. So that would be per War Scroll. Anyway, the point is, So because it's an unlimited spell, you'd want to put it on multiple dudes. And let's say you had some Rune Smiters in there too. So they're putting on these dudes, and then you're sending them in, hoping they don't die. Maybe they've got the Thickened Scales subtract 1 from Rend characteristic, which means you still get to roll all the save rolls, but now it's less likely to actually hurt you. But you still get to roll as many save rolls as you would have before, which means you'll roll some ones. Granted, if we saw something about in the original Prayer Lore there was -1 to wound that made you more defensive, so that doesn't overlap with these because you can't choose both Prayer Lores, or maybe you can with the new enhancement thing. I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but if you can choose multiple Prayer Lores, I don't know if that means all priests get access to all of them. Because I think they said in the article about choosing multiple enhancements that you could choose more lores. Or does it mean you have to assign specific lores to specific dudes? I don't know. But in any case, maybe you could have both of those. So we'll have to wait and see. Again, it's early days with this. We haven't seen all the rules, and it's a little speculation until then. I like this all right, but I think in general I'd prefer the -1 to wound and then -1 rend over this when you're getting hit, when you're getting punched in the face, you're doing a little bit more mortal damage next to it. But anyway. Okay, so let's look at the old 2 Prayer Lore spells, so the existing ones that are not unlimited, and then let's see how they stack with the rest here. So we got Prayer of Grimnir's Fury. This goes off on a 4, and let's say it crits on an 8. I like to call it a crit, but it's just more the bonus ability. Pick a friendly Fyreslayer's Priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible friendly Fyreslayer's Infantry Hero. Holy within 12 of them to be the target. Then make a chanting roll. The target can use 2 fight abilities this turn. After the first is used, however, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. If it was an 8+, also add +1 to wound for the target's combat attacks for the rest of the turn. Obviously, fighting twice is fantastic, so I like that one a whole lot. It does have to go on an Infantry Hero, but you have some decently hitty guys. I think obviously you've got the Rune Father on foot. He's not bad, so his attack profile is 4 attacks, 3s, -2, 3, and you could be getting, what did I say, +1 to wound on that, so that's not bad at all. But obviously the 2 other heroes that you could put this on that are kind of the big choices would be the Doomseeker or the Grimwrath Berserker. The Doomseeker has 5 attacks, 3s, -1, 2. Yeah, and he gets more damage as he gets damage, so that's kind of cool. Or you've got the Grimwrath Berserker, which is 5 attacks, 3s, -2, 2. But it has only a once per battle any combat phase for fighting twice and then strike last. But obviously you could use that once for free, and then you could try to use the prayer on top of that. So, it's flavorful. I don't know if it's really strong, but it could make a difference, especially if you're building like a Hero Hammer kind of thing. What would be cool is if that was an unlimited spell and you just went super Hero Hammery and had just a bunch of priests running around with those dudes and everyone got strike twice. That'd be kind of fun. But honestly, I think they might die before they get to fight the second time because they're not super tanky. But anyway, and the last one that was in the existing spell or prayer lore was Wrath of Volcatrix. That's 4, goes off on a 4. It has the bonus on an 8. And you pick a visible friendly Magmadroth Holy Than 12. For the rest of the turn, the battle damage ability has no effect on the target, so it's not losing attacks on the monstrous profile that gets bracketed. And add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's companion weapons. If it was an 8+, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of the target's companion weapons for every 4 damage points the target has. Okay, so considering they had 14 wounds, you're going to get max +3 attacks instead of just +1. Interesting. So if I'm reading that rule correctly, you get the ability, usually you get both abilities, because if, no, it says also normally. So instead, it doesn't say instead here in the rule, but I'm assuming that it's replacing it. So it's, maybe not, actually. Maybe it's an additional, because otherwise the wording of the bonus one on an 8+ would seem to imply that if you don't have at least 4 damage on the target, then you don't get any extra attacks. So it might be an addition. It sounds like it would be an addition. So that would be taking you from 1 to possibly 4 extra attacks on the companion weapons, which could be a big deal. But that was the old Magmadroth-oriented prayer. So we've already seen, I was starting to think that the prayer lore here was only going to be focused on Magmadroths. It might still be, actually. But there's at least one Magmadroth prayer in the regular prayer lore anyway. Okay, let's look at these two here now that we've looked at the not unlimited spells, the regular prayers, I mean. So we've got Fury of Volcatrix, goes off on a 4 and has the bonus effect on an 8+. Fyreslayer's Priest, pick a visible friendly Fyreslayer's unit, holy than 12, could be any type. Add 1 to hit rolls for the target's combat attacks, including those made with companion weapons, until the start of your next turn. So you're getting a free all-out attack, basically. Could stack with an all-out attack to ignore a -1 to hit somewhere and still get the effect. And it doesn't have to be on a unit that's got companion weapons, like i.e. a Magmadroth, but if you do, it will apply to them. So it really is functioning like an all-out attack in that sense, because all-out attack is one of the few abilities in the game that does impact the companion weapons. In addition, if the chanting roll was an 8+, add 2 to the attack's characteristic of the target's companion weapons until the start of your next turn. So this is very much focused on the Magmadroths, but if you need a fallback, you can still add +1 to hit for a non-Magmadroth unit and get some impact. So that's pretty cool. Adding +1 to hit and +2 to attacks is kind of, it's not necessarily directly better than the last one. Depends on how you look at it, but the rule that I just read off that did up to 4 extra attacks, if I'm reading it correctly. But it's not bad at all. Certainly with all the stuff that we're talking about with the Magmadroths. And this is, in fact, combat attacks. And this is interesting. Okay, so in the first part of the rule, the part that goes off like automatically if it goes off, the one that doesn't need to have the crit bonus, it says target's combat attacks, +1 to hit. But the second one said add 2 to the attack characteristics of the target's companion weapons until the start of your next turn. And again, if we scroll down here, this is a companion weapon. So you'd actually getting +2 attacks on the ranged weapons as well, which is pretty cool. And then if we were to combine that with this once per battle your shooting phase, it says double the attacks. Now remember, doubling, they have an order of operations here. Doubling happens before adding. So that would be 4 times 2, so 8, and then plus another 2 for your shooting attacks. I'm assuming this is meant to be for shooting attacks and melee attacks, but that it is rules as written how this would be interpreted. But it could be that since this one was only about melee that they didn't mean for that. But who knows? Maybe you get both. Okay, and then the last one here was Blazing Impetus, goes off on a 5, and then crits on a 10, if you want to call it that. Pick a friendly Fyreslayer's Priest, chant this prayer, a friendly Fyreslayer's unit holy than 12 as the target, and it was not set up this turn, so there's an extra stipulation. It's easy to miss those because these directions we have to follow in the declare step are so copy-paste here that it's easy not to miss that extra little clause there. But they have to have not been set up this turn. But the target can use the normal move ability as if it were your movement phase. If your chaining rolls a 10 up, you can pick another eligible unit. I mean, this is a great prayer because you can push in your hero phase all of your very slow dudes, but with Magmadroths it makes them even more aggressive, way up the field. Again, it says normal move. That doesn't mean you can run or anything. It just means use your normal move. So that's 4 inches for the normal guys, or for the Magmadroths, what was it, 10 inches? Let's look again. Yeah, 10 inches. Okay. How do I feel about this prayer lore compared to the existing one? So we gave up the unlimited prayer for -1 to wound and potentially a -1 rend from all attacks in order to get this volcanic blood extra splashback. I would rather have the old unlimited spell or prayer. Let's look. Then we also had you could give a Fyreslayer's infantry hero 2 fight abilities, possibly with +1 to wound for the combat attacks. Obviously, if you're not doing that build, that one goes totally unused, and they're clearly building this new set of rules around Magmadroths, so this second spell, or any one of these two, is better for that. And then the last one was Wrath of Volcatrix was battle damage had no effect on your dude. And add +1 attacks to the companion weapons, which in a certain sense, because the battle damage reduced the attacks by, let's check that out again, at least on this guy, but I think he's the same as all the other Magmadroths. This went from 6 attacks down to 4, so you were losing 2. So if you did in fact need that prayer, you're implicitly gaining +1 attack plus these 2, so it's actually a 3-point net swing of attacks, which is kind of bigger than it looks, assuming that you're already wounded when it went off. And then you could also add +1 attacks for depending on how wounded he was. which was situational. And obviously, if he was bracketed, he would at least have 10, assuming you weren't just doing the prayer for the +1 attack. You were trying to get rid of the bracketing as well. So if you had 10, you're at least getting an extra 2. So I think that means you're getting an extra 3, which, considering the net swing, it functionally feels like an extra 5. Honestly, I could see it kind of going either way on these. I think this might be one of the better prayer lures I've seen if you're going to run the Magmadroths, because this Fury of Volcatrix prayer here with the +1 to hit for the combat text, including companions, is very nice, especially considering they're hitting on floors on the companion weapons. And you could be adding +2 to the attack, so getting those attacks anyway. Or it would, if you are bracketed, it would just be putting you back to what your standard set is, so back up to 6 for that one that's bracketed, and the other one would always get +2 to attacks. And then this guy right here, getting the extra move is so clutch for this army. Granted, it's a little hard to go off, especially for 2 units, but yeah, I don't know. I said I was a little down on these rules when I first looked at them, but I'll be honest, I hadn't spent quality time looking at the prayer lore. I think this might be one of the better extra new lores I've seen thus far. The monster traits, as I've said previously, are basically free anyway, so there's nothing to complain about here. It's just boosting that build, and of course I'd go with this guy if I could. And then the new War Scroll is fine, especially now that I realized you could pick this for multiple dudes to get the Fire, Blood, and Vengeance, as long as you have, at least to the best of my understanding, one Auric Runefather for each of these dudes to pick, but it could be they all pick the same dude. I don't know. I'd have to see some rules clarification on that, but very interesting. So I think maybe the Magmadroths got a boost here that's worth talking about. People who play the Magmadroths build these days, let me know what you think. I actually have a Fyreslayers army, but I've literally never put it on the table. I bought it back when Lithizian Defenders came out in the 2nd edition, and you could play Ideneth, Stormcast, KO, and Fyreslayers together, and I just saw it as a cool way to play a weird coalition army, and then that fell away, and then there was no other way to really get Fyreslayers out for me, and it just isn't an army that I've ever been super excited about, but I haven't sold it yet because I've been hoping, fingers crossed, because I like dwarves and I like runes a lot. My hope was that they would have a new set of like runes, kind of like you see with the dwarves in Old World, and was hoping that they would expand the range. So fingers crossed that they get some really cool new buffs in the future and they're not going away, because I would like to play an all Magmadroths type build at some point with my naked stubby dwarfs. Anyway, guys, let me know what you're thinking about the Fyreslayers update. This one went longer than I expected, actually, but I enjoyed this one. So maybe I changed my mind. I think this is one of the at least more flavorful ones, and I think it's helping you play the Magmadroth build that much better, which is expanding how the army feels like it could be played. Anyway, until next time, guys, Ryan out.